Muhammad Rasulullah, the Apostle of Mercy, by Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi. Chapter 4, Makkah before the Prophet. Ismail alayhi salam, the son of Ibrahim in Makkah. The Prophet Ibrahim came down to the valley of Makkah, surrounded by the mountains, naked rocks, bare and rugged crags. Nothing to sustain life, no water, nor verdure, vegetation, or food grains was there to be found. He had with him his wife Hajar and their son Ismail. Ibrahim had wandered through the desert of Arabia in order to move away from the widespread cult of idol worship and was to set up a center for paying homage to the one and only God, where he would invite others to bow down before the Lord of the world. He wanted to lay the foundation of a lighthouse of guidance, a sanctuary of peace, which should become the radiating center of true monotheism, faith, and righteousness. God blessed the sincerity of Ibrahim and the dry valleys of this wild country. Ibrahim had left his wife and his infant son in this inhospitable territory. Here, in the midst of rugged hills, the Master of the worlds manifested his grace by causing water to come forth from the earth, which is called the well of Zamzam to this very day. When Ismail was a few years old, Ibrahim went to visit his family in Makkah. Ibrahim now made up his mind to sacrifice Ismail for the sake of God, for the Lord had commanded him such in a dream. Offer up your son Ismail. Obedient to the Lord as he was, Ismail at once agreed to have his throat cut by his father, but God saved Ismail and instituted the day of great sacrifice, which is Eid, in order to commemorate the events of all the times and for all times to come in the future. Since he was destined to help Ibrahim in his mission and become the great progenitor of the last prophet as well as of the nation charged to disseminate the message of God and to struggle for it in the end of times. Ibrahim came back to Makkah again and, assisted by his son Ismail, built the house of God. While the father and the son occupied themselves in work, they were also to beseech God to confer God's grace, cause them to live as well as die in Islam, and to help their progeny to become a watch over their patrimony of monotheism, not only by protecting their mission against every risk or peril, but also by becoming its standard bearers and preachers, braving every danger and sacrificing everything for its sake until their call reached the furthest corners of the world. They also supplicated God to raise up a prophet amongst their offerings and offsprings, who would renovate and revive the summons of Ibrahim alayhi salam and to bring to completion the task that was initiated by him. And when Ibrahim and Ismail were raising the foundations of the house, as is said in the Quran, Ibrahim prayed, O Lord, accept from us this duty. You, only you, are the hearer and the knower, O Lord, and make us submissive unto you, and of our seed a nation submissive unto you, and show us our ways of worship, and relent towards us. O Lord, O you, only you, are the relenting and the merciful. O Lord, raise up in their midst a messenger from them, who shall recite unto them your revelations, and shall instruct them in the scripture and in wisdom, and show them, and shall make them grow. O you, only you, are the mighty, the wise. Unquote. The prayer sent by Ibrahim included that the request was that the house he was constructing become a sanctuary of peace, and that God might keep his progeny away from idol worship. Ibrahim held nothing more in abomination than idol worship, nor deemed anything more fraught with danger for his progeny, for he knew the fate of earlier nations that used to indulge in idol worship. He was aware how the great prophets of God had earlier struggled and fought this evil throughout their lives, but in no time after their departure from the world, their people were again misled into this idol worship by the devil's advocates disguised as promoters of faith. Ibrahim had implored the Lord to bless his descendants with his own spirit of struggle against the evils of idol worship, he wanted his heirs to carry into their thoughts how he had strived all his life for the sake of the truth and faith, how he had bid farewell to his heart and home, and realized why he had incurred the wrath of his idolatrous father, and appreciate the wisdom behind his making a selection of that valley, unbelievably bare, with no scrap of soil, sheer from top to bottom, and jagged and sharp for their habitation. He wanted them to understand why he had preferred that wilderness, holding no prospects of progress and civilization, over verdant lands and flourishing towns and centers of trade, arts and commerce where one could easily meet one's wishes. Ibrahim had invoked the blessings of God on his sons so that they might be esteemed and adored by all the nations of the world, that the people of every nation and country might become attached to his children, that they should come from every nook and corner of the world to pay homage to his posterity, and thus become a means of satisfying their needs in that barren country, as is said in the Quran. And when Ibrahim said, "My Lord, make safe this territory and preserve me and my sons from serving idols. My Lord, lo, they have led many of mankind astray, but who follows me, he verily is of me, and those who disobey me, still you are forgiving and merciful. Our Lord, I have settled some of my posterity in an uncultivable valley, near unto your holy house, our Lord, that they may establish proper worship. So incline some hearts of men that they may earn towards them, and provide you them with fruits in order that they may be thankful." Unquote. The Quraysh. God answered each and every prayer sent by Ibrahim and Ismail. The descendants of Ismail multiplied exceedingly, so that the barren valley overflowed with the progeny of Ibrahim. Ismail took for his wife a girl from the tribe of Jurhum, a clan belonging to Arab Ariba. In the lineal descendants of Ismail, Adnan was born, whose lineage was universally recognized as the most worthy and noble amongst them. The Arabs, being too particular about the purity of race and blood, have always treasured the lineage of Adnan's progenies in the storehouses of their memory. Adnan had many sons, of which Ma'dad was the most prominent. Amongst the sons of Ma'dad, Mudar was the most distinguished. Then Fahir bin Malik in the lineage of Mudar achieved eminence. And finally, the descendants of Fahir bin Malik bin Mudar were known as the Quraysh. Thus came into existence the clan of Quraysh, the nobility of Makkah, whose lineage and exalted position amongst the tribes of Arabia, as well as whose virtues of oratory and eloquence, civility and gallantry, and high-mindedness were unanimously accepted by all. The recognition accorded to the Quraysh without a dissent voice throughout the peninsula became in due course of time a genuine article of faith to the people of Arabia. Qusay bin Kilab. Qusay bin Kilab was born in the direct line of Fihr, but the hegemony of Makkah had by that time passed on from Jurhum's clan to the hands of Khuzaa. The Khuzaites, Qusay bin Kilab, recovered the administration of the Kaaba and the town through his organizing capacity and superior qualities of head and heart. The Quraysh strengthened the hands of Qusay bin Kilab in dislodging the Khuzaites from the position of leadership and upset them. Qusay was now a master of the town, loved and respected by all. He held the keys of the Kaaba and the rights to water the pilgrims from the well of Zamzam, to feed the pilgrims, to preside at assemblies, and to hand out war banners. In his hands lay all the dignitaries of Makkah, and nobody entered the Kaaba until it was opened for him. Such was his authority in Makkah during the lifetime that no affair of the Quraysh was decided but by him, and his decisions were followed like a religious law which could not be infringed upon. After the death of Qusay, his sons assumed his authority, but Abdu Manaf amongst them was the most illustrious. His eldest son, Hisham bin Abdu Manaf, conducted the feedings and the waterings of the pilgrims, and after his death the authority was passed on to Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Prophet. His people held him in the highest esteem, and such was the popularity gained by him, so they say was never enjoyed by anybody amongst his ancestors. Banu Hashim, the progeny of Hashim, who now filled the stage and assumed a commanding position amongst the Quraysh, was like the stream of light in the darkness of Arabia. The stretches of Banu Hashim, preserved by the historians and genealogists, although few in number, eloquently speak of the nobility of the character and moderation of their disposition, the reverence they paid to the house of God, their sovereign contempt for the things unjust and uneven, their devotion to fair play and justice, their willingness to help the poor and the oppressed, their magnanimity of heart, their valor and horsemanship, in short, of every virtue admired by the Arabs of the pagan past. Banu Hashim, however, shared the faith of their contemporaries, which had beclouded the light of their souls. But despite this failing, they had all the goodness as the forefathers of the great Prophet, who was to inherit their qualities and to illustrate them with his own shining example for the guidance of the entire humanity. The Meccan paganism. The Quraysh continued to glorify the Lord of the worlds, from whom all the blessings flow, like their forefather Ibrahim and Ismail, until Amr bin Luhay became the chief of Khuzats. He was the first to deviate from the religion of Ismail. He set up idols in Makkah and bade people to worship and venerate them. He instituted the custom of Saiba, which were to be held in reverence. Amr bin Luhay, who modified the divine laws of permissible and impermissible. It is related that once Amr bin Luhay went from Makkah to Syria on some business where he found people worshipping idols. He was so impressed by the way of idol worshippers that he obtained a few idols from them, brought them back to Makkah, and asked the people there to pay honors to them. It might have been so, or perhaps on his way to Syria, Amr bin Luhay had happened to pass through Betra, which was known for ancient historians and geographers as Petria or Petra in Jordan. It was the key city on the caravan route between Sabah and Mediterranean, located on an arid plateau 3,000 feet high to the south of what is today Transjordan, as mentioned by the Greek and the Roman historians. The city was founded by an ethnically Arab tribe in the early part of the 6th century BC. These people carried their merchandise to Egypt, Syria, the valley of the Euphrates, and to Rome. Most likely they took the way to the valley of the Euphrates through Hijaz. These people were an idolatrous people who made their deities of graven stones. Some historians hold the view that Lat, the famous deity of northern Hijaz during the pre-Islamic period, had been originally imported from Petra and was assigned an honored place amongst the local god and goddesses. The above view finds a confirmation in the history of Syria by Philip K. Hitti, who writes about the religion of these people. Quote, "At the head of the pantheon stood Dushara, which is Dusara, a sun deity worshipped under the form of an obelisk or an unknown four-cornered black stone. Associated with Dusara was Alat, chief goddess of Arabia. Other goddesses cited in the inscriptions were Manat al-Uzza of Quranic fame. Hubal also figures in the inscriptions. It is noteworthy that the above descriptions relate to a period when idolatry had, in different forms and shapes, engulfed Arabia and countries around it. Jesus Christ and his disciples had not yet appeared on the scene, who latter labored to restrain this expansion of idol worship. Judaism had already proved its incompetence to this task, since being essentially a racial religion, it allowed none except for the children of Israel to join its faith to the creed of monotheism preached by it. Another writer, Daisy O'Leary, tracing the influences responsible for introduction of idol worship in the Arabian Peninsula, sums up his findings in his book Arabia Before Muhammad in the following words. Quote, "It seems fairly safe, therefore, to understand that the use of images was an instance of Syrio-Hellenistic culture which had come down the trade route. It was a recent introduction in Makkah in the time of the Prophet and was probably unknown to the Arab community at large." Unquote. Worship of the idols was thus the popular creed of the people in the valley of the Euphrates and the lands to the east of Arabia. As the Arabians were bound since time immemorial by the ties of commerce with these countries, it was not unlikely that their cultural influence was responsible for grafting idol worship within the Arabian Peninsula. In his History of Ancient Iraq, George Rokes says that during the 3rd century BC and long thereafter, idol worship was very popular in Mesopotamia. Every city, old or new, gave shelter to several foreign gods besides the local deities. There were also reports which suggest that idol worship gradually came into vogue amongst the Quraysh in olden times, as some historians relate, when anybody went on a long journey from Makkah, he took a few stones from the enclosures of the sanctuary as marks of grace with him. In due course of time, he started venerating the monoliths they admired most. The subsequent generations, not knowing the reasons for holding such monoliths in esteem, started worshipping these stones like other pagan people of the surrounding countries. The Quraysh therefore remain attached to some of their older traditions, like paying deference to the holy sanctuary, its circumambulation, which is the Kaaba, which is Hajj and Umrah, the gradual evolution of different religions showing substitution of means for the ends and slow progression from the supposition to conclusions lent support to the view put forth by the historians about the beginning of idol worship amongst the Quraysh. The esteem and the reverence in which even certain misguided Muslim sects came to hold the portraits and sculptures of the saints, the way they sluggishly adopted this course, possesses an incriminating evidence in support of the gradual evolution of idol worship in the Arabian Peninsula. That is why the Islamic Sharia completely stalls all those tracks and alleys which led to the undue veneration of people, places, relics, for they ultimately led to ascribing partners to God. The elephants. It was during this time that a significant event, unparalleled in the history of Arabia, came to pass, which clearly showed something of vital importance likely to take place in the near future. It augured well for the Arabs in general and predicted a unique honor for the Kaaba, never attained by any place of worship anywhere in the world. The incident afforded hope for expecting a great future for the Kaaba, a future on which depended the destiny of religions, or rather the entire humanity, since it was soon to unfold itself in the shape of an eternal message of righteousness and peace. An implicit belief of the Quraysh. The Quraysh had always held the belief that Baytullah, or the house of God, had a special place of honor in the eyes of the Lord, who has himself its protector and defender. The trust placed by the Quraysh in the inviolability of the Kaaba is amply borne out of a conversation between Abraha and Abdul Muttalib. It so happened that Abraha seized 200 camels belonging to Abdul Muttalib, who was the grandfather of the Prophet, who then called upon him and sought permission to see Abraha. Abraha treated Abdul Muttalib with the greatest respect and got off his throne and made him sit side by side. Asked to tell the purpose of his visit, Abdul Muttalib replied that he wanted the king to return his 200 camels which the king had taken. Abraha, taken by surprise, asked Abdul Muttalib, "Do you wish to talk about your 200 camels taken by me, but not say anything about the house on which depends your religion and the religion of your forefathers, which I have come to destroy?" Abdul Muttalib boldly replied, "I am the owner of the camels, and the house has an owner who will himself defend it." Abraha again said, "How can it be saved from me?" Abdul Muttalib replied, "This is a matter between you and God. Who could dare do harm or cast a blighting glance at the house of God? Its protection was in truth the responsibility of God." The episode briefly was that Abraha, who was the viceroy of Negus, that is the king of Abyssinia in Yemen, built an imposing cathedral in Sana'a and gave it by the name Al-Qulais. He intended to divert the Arabs' pilgrimage to this cathedral. Being a Christian, Abraha had found it intolerably offensive that the Kaaba should remain the great national shrine, attracting crowds of pilgrims from almost every Arabian clan. He desired that his church should replace the Kaaba as the most sacred chapel of Arabia. It was this, however, something inglorious for the Arabs. Veneration of the Kaaba was a settled disposition with the Arabs. They never equated any other place of worship with that of the Kaaba, nor could they have exchanged it with anything else. The perturbation caused by the declared intentions of Abraha set them on fire. Some Canaanites, daredevils, accepted the challenge, and one of them defiled the church by defecating in it. Now this caused a serious tumult. Abraha was enraged, and he swore that he would not take rest until he destroyed the Kaaba. Abraha took the road to Makkah at the head of a strong force which included a number of large elephants. The Arabs had heard awesome stories about elephants. The news made them all confused and bewildered. Some of the Arab tribes even tried to obstruct the progress of the Abraha army, but they were soon realizing that it was beyond their power to measure swords with him. Now, hoping against hope, they left the matter to God, putting in trust in him to save the sacred sanctuary. The Quraysh took to the hills and craggy gorges in order to save themselves from the excesses of Abraha's soldiers. Abdul Muttalib and a few other people belonging to the Quraysh took hold of the door of the Kaaba, praying and imploring God to help them against Abraha. On the other side, Abraha drew up his troops to enter the town and got his elephant Mahmud ready for attack. On his way to the city, the elephant knelt down and did not get up in spite of severe beating. But when they made it face Yemen, it got up immediately and started to walk off. God then sent down flocks of birds, each carrying stones in its claws. Everyone was hit by these stones and they all died. The Abyssinians thereupon withdrew, infringed by the way they had come, continually being hitten by stones and falling dead in their way. Abraha too was badly injured, and when his soldiers tried to take him back, his limbs fell one by one until he met a miserable death on reaching Sana'a. The incident finds a reference in the Quran as well. As is said in the Quran, "Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with the owner of the elephant? Did he not bring their stratum to naught and sent them against a swarm of flying creatures which pelted them with stones of baked clay and made them like green crops devoured by cattle?" Unquote. Repercussions of Abraha's failure. When God turned back the Abyssinians from Makkah, crushed and humbled, and inflicted his punishment upon them, the Arabs naturally looked up to the Quraysh in great respect. They started, "Verily, these were the people of God. God defeated their army, and they did not have even to fight the assailants." The esteem of the people for the Kaaba naturally increased, strengthening their conviction in its sanctity. It was undoubtedly a miracle, a sign of the advent of the Prophet, who was to cleanse the Kaaba of its contamination of idols. It was an indication that the honor of the Kaaba was to rise with the final dispensation to be brought by him. One could say that the incident foretold the advent of the great Prophet. The Arabians attached too much importance, and rightly too, to this great event. They instituted a new calendar from the date of its occurrence. Accordingly, they find in their writings such references that certain events took place in the year of the elephant, and that such person was born in that year, and that certain incident came to pass so many years after the year of the elephant. This year of the miracle was 570 AD. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.